email here about the Deltana PH60.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Oh, fine, sir. And yourself?
Good. I'm a little starstruck over here, Rich, because I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller from your YouTube channel.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, thank you.
It's very. Those are always very helpful. I appreciate them. Over the years of I've looked at extremely vague and schematic cut sheets and have been completely baffled about how to design something, and I'll find a video of you explaining exactly what I need in a life.
Sometimes it's nice to see the thing.
That's right. That's right. So, Deltana PH60, you have several and many methods of allaying my concerns, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, well, your concern is at carrying the weight and doing so without it sagging. So your stress test was taking one set, a top or a bottom, and pinching the outside corner opposite the pivot pin. And sure, you can compress that if you're determined to, and reduce that margin between the two leaves down to something that could begin to make contact.
Yeah.
That sort of test isn't accurate because, first of all, the load would be distributed evenly. But what completely dispels your concern is the fact that you've got a pivot up at the top. That's going to prevent that sort of lateral movement and stress on the hinge. I would think if you were loading it with something well beyond the 200 pounds that Deltana has had this tested for, it's been found to be compliant. So that's the other reason. That's another reason. That top pivot pin is going to keep that door true plumb, level, and square. And the lateral margin between the bushing itself and that pivot pin is so small, we would need to deal with extremely small values to express it. So you're not going to have any play in it, really, lateral play. And the majority of the weight is up near the top of the door, and all that top pivot pin, it's not carrying any weight, obviously, but it's keeping it from tipping towards its center of gravity.
Yeah.
So, and that, another thing I'd say is I've been selling this for years.
Yeah.
These have never failed once.
You never get feedback like this was hard to keep.
Never.
So I have basically this, our client, so we're metal workers and we build custom doors all the time. We always deal with a little sag, but that's just like the nature of what we do. Our client is this job. Our client is has a millwork background, so he just wants like 1/8-inch reveals everywhere, including under these brass and glass doors. And like if I just, put a bar, right, instead of I put a bar on this hinge across the top of the hinge, right, distribute that load out. Okay. Well, look, I appreciate. I guess that does somewhat allay I just really wanted to make sure that you didn't have like a backlog of like, here's what to be careful about. Here's what I would, because it seemed like you'd actually installed one of these yourself previously,
I've machined for. I don't think there's any hardware I've never machined for. There has to be, and olive knuckle hinges to me for some reason were the most difficult. But So what's, I see your drawing.
Yeah.
And given the fact that, you've got, how heavy will they be?
They're like 160 pounds, I think.
Yeah. And they are, they're very thin.
They're very thin. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're essentially like a glass shower door with metal trim around it, right?
Yeah.
But below it's going to be like wet glaze. It's going to be completely relying on the glass for structure and 1/2-inch glass. So, the whole assembly has to be like rigid pin to pin, which I guess is like the, that's basically the deal. But so I have to work with these mill workers to mortise out in the top and bottom of their cases. Typically, they gave us this thing, and they were acting like, oh, you're going to use a Euro hinge for these doors because we're mill workers and we just use Euro hinges for everything. So they gave me like 0 clearance behind the door, and then obviously no jam at all. And
take a lot of Euro hinges to hang a 150-pound door.
Yeah, that's what we uncovered, is that you don't want to get in the business. There's 8 of these doors, and I don't want to have 8 Euro hinges per door, and they're diminishing returns, I'm sure, for each one that you add. So the requirement of the client was like, I want to see the thinnest brass edge that I can see, and blah blah blah. So that's kind of where we're ending up. But I'm trying to set the mortise depth of the pivot hinge for these mill workers, and also if there's anything that I can head off of the pass. Like, for example, I've got the bearing washer is less than a 1/16 of an inch, but when I compress, it's like the pinch thing that I showed, right? If that angle kept over the course of 2 feet, that's like 1/4 of an inch. Well, I only have 1/8 of an inch under this door necessarily. So that's really my concern, that because I can take the 2 leaves of the nice hinge and I can wobble them back and forth, they don't maintain a parallel relationship. I get what you're saying when you load up the bar across it. Still, the most of the mass is going to happen away from the pivot.
Yeah, but the lateral margin, if you try to wiggle that pivot pin laterally, it just doesn't move. And, and I really think that weight is going to, because it's restrained in terms of its vertical axis of pivoting, yeah. I think the overwhelming majority of weight's going to be right down a very narrow column, right over that bottom area. I would be concerned long-term, very, very long-term, over the eventual thinning of that washer.
The spinning of it?
The thinning of it.
Thinning of it, yeah.
Yeah, with your client, with the type of design criteria you have, a decade from now, I would think there would be an issue there, or I'd be very surprised if there wasn't.
Interesting. Well, by that point, we will have changed our phone number and left the state, I'm sure.
You will have received payment. So, would you like to see other pivots? The downside of other pivots is they're not going to be as concealed as this.
Yeah, and that's really why we ended up with this particular approach, because it is so sleek. I think they didn't want to see. I don't know if you're familiar with these Italian cabinet makers, Polyform. Do you know this company? Is it Polyform? Polyline. I think it's Polyform. Are you familiar with these guys?
I can't say that I am.
Okay, they make these. Do you know what the Solis air hinge is?
Yeah, I have seen that in their catalog in the past. Good tech support with those people too.
They so this Polyform, they have like a bulky version of that, or like a super heavy duty version of that air hinge, which is like it just mortises into like a frameless cabinet basically.
Yeah.
So you don't it's basically the benefit of a Euro hinge, but it completely fits within the top and bottom of the cabinet. It's actually a pretty slick piece of hardware, but this Polyform company, they don't, you can't buy this hinge from anybody. They have it exclusively. So our client had these cabinets, or had these closets. It's like super sexy sort of Italian design closets, if you can imagine. So they had these, and they wanted us to replicate them. We couldn't, obviously can't get this air hinge in Super Duty. And you can get the Solis version, but it's like a 20-pound max situation. It's like a kitchen cabinet door. Anyway, that's where we end. They wanted to see even less. So this very concealed hinge was like a compromise for them. But anyway, that's where we're at. So okay, I mean,
yeah. Is there?
I guess just to sum up the concern here, it's just like this 1/8 of an inch that they're giving me underneath. Like, is that something I'm going to be able to deal with? Like, can you, a clearance for this hinge that generally you just need the full, you just don't even mortise the bottom part usually.
No, those are mortised. They don't have to be, but they are mortised. And yeah. So, have you looked at sauce hinges? Your design may permit a smaller sauce hinge, and with enough of them, you'll carry the weight flawlessly. It's a very you know what? It's not going to work. Nope.
It's just the glass. It's like notching of the glass and because I'd have to do it on basically where they're faceless. They're making millworkers are making theirs like a faceless or a frameless cabinet, right? So I would put it in a 90-degree orientation, which would make the sauce hinge. Does that even work? I honestly didn't consider them because they usually have the depth is usually this is a 1 inch deep.
Well, the reason it won't work is because of their E dimension on their template. You've got to have that close to the pull side, and that the glass thickness, along with the trim, the structure of the door itself is just not going to permit it. Would they consider a continuous hinge?
No.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. Okay. So
here's what we know for sure. It's been tested for 200 pounds.
Yeah.
In a decade, not a single one of these has been found to be deficient. And it's not like I've got 6 months of sales history. I've got a decade or more. And not a single failure. I'm just, without going with a pivot that's capable of a greater weight envelope and most definitely losing elegance in terms of what it looks like. And I think you're going to be okay. I would be really tempted to you bought one, obviously, to try it. I would take it further and mock one up. Obviously, You're going to have to. And I would get there with my caliper and I would, see what that looks like. Thankfully the doors aren't, some of your doors are pretty wide. That would be a concern. I'm just seeing the shoe closet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, those are pairs of doors. No, you're fine. I really believe you're fine. Like I said, 10, 20 years down the road, I might want some of those washers available. But, a hinge pin is going to wear out too. So whatever, everything wears out.
Yeah. Well, you know what? The kind of money that this person has, I would not be surprised if these were not like in the trash in 5 years.
Yeah.
The whole doors and closets and whatever. That can be a little dispiriting. So spending time on that. But yeah, certainly our warranty is usually not in the 10-year range.
And the important part is I see, other than the fact that, the doors are 9 foot tall, I don't see anything that would be a warranty issue. I just don't. What you could do is, you really can't. What would be nice would be an intermediate, a couple of them, in fact. But you can't. At least I don't.
Really, nothing on the market that would do that, right? Like snake around the side of the door and come out in front, like from a.
So, perhaps, and I'm going to send you an email to a manufacturer who does make custom. So this PH60, there's a couple of companies out there that would make custom variants of this material, F3 that I can think of. And I'll send you a catalog so that you can look at that and say, okay, there might be some reason to re-engineer this or rethink it, but I'm looking at your drawings. I'm comfortable with that, the weight of that pivot. If you were wider, that would be a concern. But your doors they're 2.0 wide doors. They're 2.8 at the most.
Yeah.
So I'm just not convinced there's going to be a problem.
Cool. All right. Well, that's good. Yeah, send me that catalog. I'm always interested. All right. And, all right. Well, that's it. Hey, I did have a question. You guys, I don't think, had the oil rub bronze in stock when I got these. I just got the satin nickel because it seemed like you had that on hand. Or was it satin brush nickel?
Deltana would have. Deltana would have it as well. Deltana would have oil rubbed on hand. Sure.
Oh, okay. So, what would be? I have to get my PM to actually put the order in. But what do you guys have a lead time for getting? I guess 8 sets of the oil rubbed.
So what I'll do is I will confirm the lead time and then I will send you a quote.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And the other thing I'm thinking is looking at your photograph that might look excessive in terms of the gap opposite the end where your fingers are, because I bet those two leaves kind of lifted apart a little bit during that type of action, because there's a lack of, there is no load in that area. So it might have looked worse than it actually would be when it's installed. And I got to, I've had people install these in applications just like yours. So I'm, as I'm talking, I'm remembering there was a job 6 months ago. It was extremely unusual, just like yours. Hidden door, really heavy, obscenely high, lots of trim, like 3.5 inch thick, and the door was within the range, and it worked just, it worked perfectly, completely hidden. So I'm thinking it's okay, and I'll check the lead time on oil rug for 8 sets.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Rich. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for calling.
Yeah. All right. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
Architectural Builders Supply hopes you have enjoyed this program. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please subscribe and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.